Why did a crime scene show both the signs of an accidental fall and the hallmarks of sustained violence? And why did investigators never fully agree on which one mattered more? On the night of December 9, 2001, emergency services in Durham, North Carolina, received a 911 call from novelist Michael Peterson. He reported finding his wife, 48-year-old Kathleen Peterson, at the bottom of the staircase inside their home. His voice on the call was controlled but strained. He told the dispatcher she was breathing, then later said she was no longer responsive. When first responders arrived, they found Kathleen lying at the base of a narrow stairwell, surrounded by a large volume of blood. She was pronounced dead at the scene. What began as a reported household accident immediately became something more complex. The stairwell showed heavy blood spatter, extending several feet up the walls and along the molding. Kathleen's injuries included multiple deep lacerations to the scalp. She had no skull fractures. The blood loss was significant. These details formed the first procedural turning point. Investigators had to determine whether a fall down the stairs could realistically account for the amount and pattern of blood, or whether blunt force trauma had occurred before she fell. Michael Peterson told police that Kathleen had been drinking wine and watching a movie earlier in the evening while he spent time outside by the pool. According to his account, she attempted to go upstairs, fell, and died from the injuries sustained in the fall. He denied any argument or physical altercation. Officers noted inconsistencies between the severity of the scene and the explanation provided, but no arrest was made that night. An autopsy conducted by the North Carolina medical examiner concluded that Kathleen died from blunt force trauma and ruled the death a homicide. The medical examiner listed multiple scalp lacerations and internal injuries, but noted the absence of fractures commonly associated with beating deaths. This conclusion marked the second turning point. Once the death was officially classified as a homicide, the investigation focused on Michael Peterson as the primary suspect. Police began reconstructing the Petersons' marriage. Kathleen was a high-earning executive at Nortel Networks. Michael was a novelist whose income was inconsistent. Financial records showed that Kathleen's salary supported most household expenses. Investigators uncovered evidence that Michael had been engaging in secret online communications with men and had maintained extramarital relationships with male partners. Kathleen's friends stated they were unaware of this. Prosecutors later argued that the potential exposure of these relationships could have provided a motive tied to humiliation, loss of control, and fear of financial consequences. This line of inquiry represented the third turning point, a shift from physical evidence to psychological and relational analysis. During the investigation, authorities learned of another death connected to Michael Peterson. In 1985, Elizabeth Ratliff, a family friend, had been found dead at the bottom of a staircase in Germany, where Peterson was living at the time. Her death had been ruled an accident due to a cerebral hemorrhage. After Kathleen's death, prosecutors exhumed Ratliff's body. A new autopsy suggested she had also suffered multiple head injuries. This discovery became the fourth turning point, transforming the case from an isolated incident into a pattern in the eyes of the state. Michael Peterson was arrested in January 2002 and charged with first-degree murder. The prosecution argued that Kathleen was beaten and then left to die at the bottom of the stairs. They emphasized the blood patterns, the nature of the scalp wounds, financial dependency, and the prior staircase death. The defense countered that Kathleen's injuries were consistent with a fall, exacerbated by alcohol and blood-thinning medication. They argued that scalp wounds can bleed profusely without skull fractures, and that blood spatter can occur from repeated impacts against architectural surfaces during a fall. The trial began in 2003 and drew national attention. Expert witnesses testified at length about bloodstain pattern analysis. One prosecution expert claimed the spatter indicated repeated blows. Defense experts argued the analysis was flawed and overstated. Jurors were shown photographs of the stairwell and diagrams reconstructing possible movements of the body. This stage marked the fifth turning point. The case hinged on the interpretation of forensic science that was still debated within the field. In October 2003, Michael Peterson was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For many observers, the verdict rested less on conclusive proof and more on cumulative suspicion. Years passed with Peterson maintaining his innocence. In 2011, a significant procedural shift occurred. The North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation disclosed that the prosecution's bloodstain expert had provided misleading testimony in multiple cases, including Peterson's. Courts began reviewing convictions tied to that analyst. Peterson was granted a new trial. This revelation marked the sixth turning point. The integrity of the forensic evidence that secured the conviction was now in question. Peterson was released on bail while awaiting retrial. During this period, the case gained renewed scrutiny. Independent experts re-examined the physical evidence. New theories emerged, including the so-called owl theory, which proposed that Kathleen may have been attacked by a bird outside, sustaining scalp wounds before collapsing on the stairs. While unconventional, the theory highlighted lingering uncertainty about how the injuries were inflicted. The fact that no murder weapon was ever found continued to complicate the prosecution's case. In 2017, rather than face another full trial, Peterson entered an offered plea to a reduced charge of manslaughter. Under this plea, he acknowledged that sufficient evidence existed for a conviction while maintaining his innocence. He was sentenced to time served and released. This outcome constituted the seventh turning point, legal closure without factual resolution. Despite the plea, critical questions remain unanswered. No definitive mechanism of injury has ever been proven beyond dispute. Experts continue to disagree on whether the blood evidence supports assault or accident. The similarities between the two staircase deaths remain statistically rare but not conclusively linked. The offered plea closed the courtroom process but avoided a final determination of guilt based on evidence tested again before a jury. For Kathleen Peterson's family, the plea did not resolve the central question of how she died. For Michael Peterson, it allowed freedom without exoneration. The house was eventually sold. The staircase remains an object of analysis rather than evidence. The case persists in public memory because it exposes the limits of forensic certainty, the power of narrative framing, and the psychological pressure placed on jurors asked to resolve scientific disputes they cannot independently verify. Even now, the case poses an unresolved human threat that extends beyond the individuals involved. It demonstrates how a death can become defined not by what is conclusively known, but by what cannot be ruled out. The system reached an ending, but the facts never fully settled, leaving the question of what truly happened on that staircase suspended between accident, violence, and doubt.